My goal today is to try to explain how DNA works as far as researching your bloodline. My goal is really to try to keep this simple. I mean, it is simple, but there are terms that will sometimes make things seem a little bit more complex than they really are. You may come across the word polymorphism in studying this, and so that could throw people off, but it just means changing multiple times, right? Poly, many, morph, change. So, I'm a computer programmer, and in the computer world, that term still exists, right? Where something can be used for something else or change into something else, right? But it's inherited from another object. So the same concept exists here when studying DNA. Actually, the whole computer terminology comes from this world of changing genes or changing objects. So there's some similar terminology, but my goal is to try to break this down based on what I've researched. I'm not a geneticist. I'm not in that field. Okay, but there are some questions that are raised when you go to these videos or sites, like the doctor that hangs on the concept of E1B1A haplogroup, right? And so, it just gets more confusing because many of us, our Y chromosome is different. Let's say mine is G2A4. Well, if you look into it, it shows up in the Levant, but it also shows up in Africa, and it also shows up in the southern part of the Asian Turkish area, right? And but it's a high concentration in the Levant, which is where our people are from. So when people just say, well, E1B1A, you should be looking for that. That's not how genes work. That is not what haplogroups mean. Okay, and so what led me down this path is, trying to research this information about, okay, well, is E1B1A equivalent to family genetics? Not particularly, not really. Okay, and as we go, I'll break that down for you and show you why, this teaching is wrong. Okay, because, or at least if it's not wrong, it's incomplete, and they're not telling you the complete truth about how genes are studied. Okay, so haplotypes. A haplotype is a set of genetic determinants located on a single chromosome. Okay, so it's a set of genes, right, that can be identified, located on one single chromosome. Now, don't forget, there's 23 chromosomal pairs. We're not even talking about the pair. We're talking about one chromosome. So it's a set of genes that determine certain traits, right? Like eye color or something like that, right? So that's what it means, genetic determinant, a gene that determines a certain feature, character, or whatever. So let me see if I can adjust this here. Okay, so from Wikipedia, a haplotype is a group of genes in an organism that are inherited together from a single parent, right? Hair color, eye color, nose shape, skin color. Okay, now a haplogroup is a group of similar haplotypes that share a common ancestor with a single nucleotide polymorphism mutation. Okay, so let me break that down. A haplogroup is a group of similar haplotypes. Remember, that was a genetic determinant, right? So it's a group of similar genetic determinants that can go from one ancestor to a descendant. That's what they're saying. That's all. And so the polymorphism mutation is almost like saying the same thing twice, right? Mutation is a change. Polymorphism is changing multiple times. Okay, so that's all it is. All right, and so we have mitochondrial DNA, which comes from the mother, and paternal DNA, which comes from the father line, which is with the Y DNA. Right now, let's continue, and I'll break more down for you. Okay, so here's another definition. A haplogroup is a genetic population group of people who share a common ancestor on the patrilineal or matrilineal line. Haplogroups are assigned letters of alphabet, and refinements consist of additional number and letter combinations. Okay, so in this use of the word haplogroup, right, this is the term that everyone uses here, right, where they try to identify a population of people, okay, and try to group them and say, well, okay, they're all related. But what it really says is, okay, somewhere in ancient past, you have an ancestor who you're descended from, who has that gene pair or that chromosomal genetic combination, or the haplotypes, right? Haplotypes are genetic determinants, right? Eye color, nose color. So you have an ancestor that had these traits that we can say in ancient past, 1,000 years ago, this gene still came across the line, right? So all that says is, you all share this same ancestor in the past. Now, remember, modern science says that all of mankind originated in Africa. So if there were no mutations in the gene, we all would have the exact same haplogroup. We all would be descendants of Adam, right? Which we are, right? But understand that, right? Adam's haplogroup is A0. He's the alpha, right? The first male. Okay, so Adam, if there was no such thing as genetic mutation, Adam would have been A0 would have been our haplogroup for everybody, every last one of us, and so it would mean nothing as far as research. But because there's a genetic mutation, okay, they can sort of group you. So remember, this is grouping. It's grouping. It's not identifying your family tree. Now you may find your family among that, right? You may find them in there, but it's not necessarily the case, and we'll see why. Okay. So a haplotype is a group of genes in an organism that are inherited together. Okay, I think I might have put that in there twice. So let me just move past that. Okay, so here's another example. Okay, look at on the left side here, right here, right? You see the ancestral haplogroup. Then you have haplogroup A, right, which is a mutation. Haplogroup B, another mutation. So let me see if I can stretch this out a little. Okay, so all of these molecules are part of the ancestral haplogroup, but at some point in the past, a mutation occurred in the ancestral molecule. So mutation A, which produced a new lineage, this is haplogroup A, and is defined by mutation. Mutation A. At some more recent point in the past, a new mutation, mutation B, occurred in a person carrying haplogroup A. Mutation B defined haplogroup B. Haplogroup B is a subgroup of subclass of haplogroup A. Both haplogroups A and B are subclasses of the ancestral haplogroup. So think of it as a tree, right? We've seen genetic trees, or really just drawing a tree from ancestry.com. If you're looking at your family lineage and you start from, say, your grandfather, well, your grandfather would be the ancestral haplogroup. Your dad would be, say, possibly, if the gene mutated, then he would be haplogroup A. And if if your gene mutated, you would be haplogroup B. But the mutation doesn't happen, after every subsequent birth, right? It happens over thousands of years, or hundreds of years, or thousands of years. Now they claim thousands of years, but that's debatable. So anyway, you have your ancestral haplogroup in gray, right? Great 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 grandfather. So your great great grandfather, let's say Adam is your ancestral haplogroup, right? A0. And so let's say Abraham is your haplogroup A. He deviated, his gene mutated from Adam. He would be haplogroup A. So let's say Jacob's gene mutated from Abraham. He would be haplogroup B. Are they all related? Yes. Right? Is Abraham the father of Jacob? Right? Yes. Right? He's the ancestor of Jacob. So you can see here, you got different haplogroups. You got haplogroup, ancestral haplogroup, which is Adam. You got haplogroup A, which is Abraham, and you have haplogroup B, which would be Jacob, right? But look at the mutation. Now you're in a different group. So if you were born from the line of Jacob, you under haplogroup B. We can't even necessarily tie you back easily to the ancestral haplogroup or Abraham's haplogroup, right? So imagine that being E1B1A, and you happen to be in haplogroup B, but you're under Jacob. But Abraham is haplogroup A. You still Abraham's descendant. Okay. So here's a world map of just the dominant haplogroups, not all of them. Okay, and so look here at this star, right? This is Y DNA Adam, right? The first gene, right? Adam and Eve, A00, originated in Africa. Okay, so if he's A00, everyone's deviated from um, uh, ancestor Adam, right? What I was thinking about the term is alpha Adam, right? Alpha being first, right? So alpha Adam is that star, right? Alpha Adam is that star right here. Okay, so you'll see these mutations. Now these are just popular mutations. This is not all the mutations that are in Africa. It just so happens, these are the dominant ones. And so if you see here, A2, A3, that's the Khoisan, right? The Khoisan are an African tribe, and they have one of the oldest genes in the world. Okay, very little mutation. They are close to alpha Adam. Okay, and so as the mutations occur, so basically you can look at this map and that people can confuse you and make you think, well, okay, they not related. No, that's not what it means, because everyone spawned from alpha Adam, and so the real thing is that you can't go by haplogroups to determine your ancestry. Okay, because this mutation process has happened over so much time, and so let's say a descendant of Abraham went to Europe. Does that make him not a descendant of Abraham? Well, if we go by haplogroup, you can't really tell. He might be that R1b in Europe, but he still might be a descendant of Abraham. So my point is, you can't go by haplogroups. Okay, so which is why these research groups that do DNA study do not really use that to identify your family lineage. They use autosomal, and so we'll get to that. So haplogroup R1b is the gene that they say most Western Europeans and even Eastern Europeans have, right? Most white folks. Okay, so they go by that, and they say, well, that's the white gene, right? And that's not true. It's really, we're talking about chromosomal pairs anyway. We're not talking about genes specific, that way. We're talking about pairings on a specific chromosomal match. And I'm not trying to be too technical. I guess this is the best way to explain it. So here's the issue. Okay, you have, as you can see here, let me read this here. Haplogroup R1b is also known as haplogroup RM343, is a human Y chromosome haplogroup. It is the most frequently occurring paternal lineage in Western Europe, as well as some parts of Russia and Central Africa, Chad and Cameroon. Okay, so you have this haplogroup in Africa, in Cameroon, right, in Chad. And so Cameroon, as you know, if you all do your DNA tests, it shows up with Cameroon somewhere in there, no matter the percentage. right? It might be a small percentage, but you're going to have usually if you're a Negro, you're so far from what I've seen, everyone who has had their um, genes, their DNA tested, have had similar pairings, right? Basically from the slave area of Negro land, right? So their heritage, based off of modern European naming of countries, comes from Benin, Togo, Cameroon, Ghana, Nigeria, Mali, basically that group, right? And so, I mean, go to YouTube and watch those who are of Negro descent share their DNA, or go on Facebook and watch some of them share their DNA. It's always going to be the same. I mean, which indicates a family. Now, how do you get to where you can identify regions like Cameroon, Chad, Benin, Togo, Nigeria? You don't get there by looking at haplogroup. So R1b won't get you there. So I'm going to show you some interesting things, okay, as we go. Okay, so here's some more information about the R1b. And the reason I'm focusing on this will become apparent. So nowadays, small percentages of R1b are found in the Levant, right? So it's okay. That's Hebrew territory. So now, so you find a small percentage there among the Lebanese, the Druze, and the Jews, and also, and almost in every country in Africa. So every country in Africa. Well, how does that work, right? So found in almost every country in Africa north of the equator. So now, actually, Cameroon and Chad is south of the equator, but they said every country in north, but there's many in the south. Okay, so among the Berbers, and if you look at our research about who the Berbers were, right? So among the Berbers from Egypt, Libya borders, among the Sudanese, the Copts, the Hausa of Sudan, the Fulani, these are Hebrews. Fulani are Hebrew. Hausa are Hebrew. Sudanese, okay, of the Sahel, 54% in Niger and Cameroon. That's a large percentage there, right? And like I said, Cameroon shows up in almost every Hebrew DNA test. And Chadic tribe of northern Nigeria, right? So Nigeria shows up in almost every Hebrew Israelite DNA test. Northern Cameroon, especially the Kirdi, where it is observed at a frequency range of 30% to 95% of men. Okay, so let's keep on. So you see here, see that uh, this dark red spot here, right, where I'm circling, right? That is the same area on those European maps where they call people Jews. It's part of Negro land. It's part of Nigeria. It's part of that whole Benin Togo connection. Now, yeah, you have a large occurrence in Europe, okay? But basically what that says is that the descendants of the guy who originally had this R1b migrated over to Europe at some point in the past. So, there's this, depending on who's teaching it, and then depending on the issue of white supremacy, you're going to be told, well, R1b originated in Europe, where, well, that contradicts modern science that says every man originated in Africa. Okay, so let's use some logic here, right? So the origin of that guy, whoever had the mutation R1b, he was from Africa. His descendants migrated to Europe. That's what it indicates, right? So you can't really say, okay, I'm going to identify my bloodline that way. You can't do it. So here's a National Geographic map that shows you Eurasian Adam. Eurasian Adam is not Alpha Adam. Okay, Eurasian Adam is that guy I just talked about who had a mutated gene of R1b, and he migrated to Europe. Right, so this guy, Eurasian Adam, the father of the R1b mutation, migrated to Europe, and that's the map. Okay, so that's all that is. So I hope I'm keeping it simple, trying to. Okay, so here's a person from Chad with R1b. Okay, now if you go by what some people try to teach as R1b haplogroup, how do you explain this woman? How do you explain her having the so-called white man's gene. That's not what haplogroups are, right? Haplogroups are ties you to an ancient ancestor. So if mankind originated in Africa, it makes sense why whites have R1b, right? The thing is, these descendants who stayed in Africa also have the R1b, but the R1b originated in Africa, just like every other gene, or most of the genes. So here's the guy from Cameroon, Hebrew Israelite from Cameroon, R1b. Now I'm not R1b, I'm G2A4, right? And if you look at mine, it says a large, it's found in the Levant at a large percentage. Now, but you have to be careful, because the real problem too, and I didn't mention this, the real problem is the sample size. So a lot of this can change overnight, because the sample size is too small today. So, people think, that science is giving you enough information, and they're not, because their sample size is too small. So here's an example of what Cameroon is, right? Which is, Nigeria, Benin, Togo, slave coast stuff, right? We all know about that. All right. So if you see here, and this is what I'm trying to talk to you about, this first column here, the first column gives the amount of the total sample size studied. So if you look at the sample sizes, and I'm gonna actually go to this page so we can look at it in more detail, but I wanted to highlight that pop-up that says it gives the amount of the total sample size studied. So hold on. Okay, so I actually moved to this page. It's on Wikipedia. Okay, and so here's that pop-up. First column gives the amount of total sample sizes. So you look and you see these, we have millions of people in these countries, right? But look at the sample size. Okay, the Arabs in Israel, 143. So this small percentage out of like millions of people, how much value is that? Because they're missing a lot of the mutations. They're not capturing a lot of the mutations in their study, and so could this be on purpose, right, to deceive people as far as the value of the matching? I mean, the sample sizes are too small. Okay, so this is a pretty decent size in Armenia. But look, for the majority of these, okay, the sample sizes are so small, right? I mean, what value is that? I'm not a scientist, right? But it raises questions. I'm not a genetic scientist. Okay, but let me go down here. So look, here's the Yoruba. Okay, Niger Congo area, 21 sample size, 4.8% are R1b, right? 93.1% are E1B1A. Okay, so as I said, you can't really go by haplogroup to identify your genes, to identify your family lineage. Okay. So what is the best way to determine your family relationship? Okay, that's autosomal DNA testing, right? Autosomal DNA. This is and it'll make sense why, but autosomal DNA is a term used in genetic genealogy to describe DNA which is inherited from the autosomal chromosomes. An autosome is any of the number of chromosomes as opposed to the sex chromosomes. Humans have 22 pairs of autosomes and 1 pair of sex chromosomes, the X chromosome and the Y chromosome. Okay. So the sex chromosomes are X and Y. Okay, so there are two sex determining chromosomes in humans, the X chromosome and the Y chromosome. Their shape actually looks like the X and the Y letters of the alphabet. Pretty interesting, isn't it? Males have one X chromosome, which they get from their mother, and one Y chromosome, okay, which they get from their father. Men always have inherited their X chromosome from their mother. Women always inherit one X chromosome from their mother and the other from their father. So the women get the X from the father and the mother. The male gets his X from the father and the mother, but the Y from the father. Okay, so that is, so this is a chromosomal pair, right? You have an X and Y pair. So, okay. So if you look at this, you have a total of 23 chromosomal pairs, right? X and Y are your sex chromosome pair, right? That determine the sex of the human or of the mammal, let's say, because animals have similar chromosome makeup. But you have 22 that are not sex chromosomes. Okay, those 22 chromosomes, right, make up the majority of your DNA makeup, right, excluding the sex chromosomes, which are X and Y. Well, that is autosomal testing, which is to match the 22 pairs to other people's 22 pairs and see where there are genetic matches on a chromosome. So they basically it's a analysis and comparison of the 22 pairs and the genes on those chromosomes to see how and where where your relationship is on that. So that's how you determine family lineage. So autosomal, the test you get at ancestry.com, that is how you determine your family, right? Or the generational relationship. Okay, so adjust this. I always got to do this, huh? Anyway, centimorgans. In genetic genealogy, a centimorgan or map unit is a unit of recombinant frequency which is used to measure genetic distance. It is often used to imply distance along a chromosome and takes into account how often recombination occurs in a region. So, basically, it looks for the frequency of this occurrence of this combination of gene pattern on a chromosome. So trying to keep it simple. But centimorgans is how the higher the number of centimorgans, the more likely you are related to that person. And so that occurrence of centimorgan, the genetic count or the genetic distance between those changes in the DNA that match the other person, if hopefully I'm clear there, that match the other person indicates your genetic relationship, right? So I'll show you an example of that. Okay, so now this is my genetic results from 23andMe compared to my brother's genetic test at ancestry.com. We wanted to see if genetic testing was true. Now this may be very useful information to you because we're twins, identical twins. So this may give you some comfort on how genes match. So if you see my first generation match, see this 1.0 generation, my first generational match is off the charts. Look, total CM 3,587 centimorgans. Now that's to my twin brother, right? That's like comparing you to yourself. Okay, and then I have other people who, third generation, fourth generation family match. But if you look at the centimorgans, it's off the charts. So, it's legit. So the other thing you can find here is, and the reason I started teaching about R1B is this here. R1B is, a Negro that I am related to, fourth and fifth generation. Now he's R1B, I'm G2A4. Now look at this guy down here. He's E1B1B. Hold up. If this was able to tie you back, right, to your genetic family, how is he E1B1B? This other guy is R1B1. It's because it's based on genetic mutation. Like I said, remember, Abraham came from Adam. Jacob came from Adam, but they may have that mutation that puts them in a different class. That's all that does, right? So look down here, right here, E1B1A, right? So I have another brother, a family member, genetic match. That's E1B1A. One that's E1B1B. One that's R1B1B, and I'm G2A4. So how that work, right? If what is being taught out there is that E1B1A, everybody should have it, and they Israelites. But right here you see every last one of us are genetically matched as family. It's because of the autosomal matches, right? Which is the 22 chromosomal pair. So are you going to look at the one match, which determines the haplogroup, which is like either the Y chromosome or the X chromosome, or you're going to look at all 23 chromosomes, right? You need to look at the majority of the chromosomes to identify who is who and who's related to who. So, the argument about, hey, you could just look at E1B1A, that doesn't work. You can see it right here. How do I match these brothers, right? E1B1A, E1B1B, R1B1B, and I'm G2A4, right? It's because of you look at the majority of the chromosomes and match those. So here's my wife's DNA match from ancestry.com. Okay. She has what everyone else has who's a descendant of the slaves from the Atlantic slave trade. We all have a combination of this, right? Pretty much. Benin, Togo, Ivory, Ghana, Nigeria, Africa, Southeast Bantu, Senegal, or Mali, right? Basically, that's usually the makeup somewhere along the line, right? So, now this is what my brother, since we're twins, this is the same DNA results for us. Nigeria, Mali, Africa, South Central, hunter-gatherers, Cameroon, Congo, Ivory Coast, Ghana, right? It's basically the same matchup. It just so happens, we have a large percentage of Nigerian in us, so that's our match right there. And so, that's what autosomal gives you. Autosomal can actually say, we've narrowed your DNA to these group of people in this area. And so what this is really saying, though, is that all the people who are descendants of the Atlantic slave trade, right, who are descendants of the slaves of the Atlantic slave trade, are family. We all show up over and over again in the same area, same region, which also indicates that we were a targeted people, right? Because it's this group, is this spot of land, this area, that is consistently showing up in a genetic match. So, for those who say, okay, well, we got, Mexicans and Colombians who are Hebrew, that's not true unless they are Negroid. Okay, and that's what genes can show you. Okay. So, hopefully, that made some sense, and I hope you find this valuable. If you have some questions, we can kick it back and forth. But hopefully this explains how genes work a little better. And like I said, I'm not a geneticist, but you can see just by studying the data, the information, that you cannot go by haplogroup. You have to go by autosomal. So, all right, shalom, peace, people. Peace.